Today, we are going to give you a masterclass from the other side with Chairman Emeritus of DDB, Keith Reinhard. Keith, thank you so much for doing this interview
Pleasure.
For the New York Festival.
Thanks for inviting me. Yes.
Quite an honor to have you here. In your book, Any Wednesday, which is the name of the memo that you used to send out every week. You had a thought, you had a very important thought for everybody. One of the things that you had talked about was having bigger ears.
Right.
Why bigger ears are important. So why are bigger ears important for creativity?
Well, because listening is, first of all, the first step in making a sale. Listening is the first step in diplomacy. And really listening to not only what the other person is saying, but what they intend to be saying, what their meaning is, and even repeating, David, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that. And
Which is a great tactic, by the way.
Yeah,
we don't do it enough.
The things you learn, if you're really a good listener, become little seeds of knowledge and maybe even inspiration that later connect and become an idea.
All right, we're going to come back to Any Wednesday a few times during our talk.
Okay.
But let's go back to Cannes for a second.
Yeah.
So in 1984, I think, you were the first American to ever be president of a Cannes jury. Now, it also seems to me that pre-1984, nobody in our industry in the United States had a clue what Cannes was about, where it was, that it was a festival.
Right. I had never really known about it, certainly hadn't ever been there. And so when I got the invitation to go as a part of the jury, I said, absolutely. And the president was not named by the Cannes organization in those days. The president was elected by the jurors. So there were 12 or 16 jurors, I can't remember, and it was up to them to elect the president. And I was nominated by a couple of Italians and a couple of Brits, and then there was a Frenchman named Jean-Claude Boulet, who's very famous in our industry, and he was a member of the jury, and he had a strong objection to my candidacy, and rose with arm gestures and loud voice in French, which I didn't really understand, but I could see it was not a seconding speech. We cannot have an American heading a French event. We own this. This is ours, and we cannot have an American being head of the jury, and especially an American who grew up, who's from the middle of the United States, because at that time I was working in Chicago. But I prevailed. Some Brits and Italians voted me in, and Jean-Claude and I became friends by the end of the week.
And then you went on to be the first American, or the first anyone to be president of two juries. Your agency, DDB, won more Grand Prix than anybody else. So we're here for the New York Festival. We know how important festivals and awards are to the industry. Why don't you say a word about that? Why are they important? Why should I care as a creative? Why should I care as a client about these awards?
As a client, you should care for the same reason that creative cares. A record of winning awards is attractive to top creative talent. And clients ought to be concerned about the level of talent, the quality of client being offered by an agency. So we're not saying all those studies have been done to relate award winning to sales effectiveness and share rise and so forth. We're not saying that. We're just saying that we need...
Which have been done, by the way.
Have been done, yes. And they're very impressive.
And compelling, yes.
And compelling. But the main reason, I think, is to attract the best talent. Because a top creative says, if I go join that agency, they have a record of winning awards, then I'm going to win awards, and that helps me in my career. Plus, as you know, David, creative people are the most insecure species in the world.
in a business where everybody's insecure.
Yeah,
The most
but the
insecure.
creative people are more insecure.
Right.
I don't know if I can ever have another idea. And so peer approval is important to people who are really insecure, and awards represent peer approval.
Right. So also, I think what I've heard you say is that, and as I think about what your answer, attracting the best creative because they come to an agency that wins many awards is also an indication of clients who understand
Yes.
what great creativity is.
Yeah, absolutely. Because
So there's a huge client benefit here.
for example, not this past Super Bowl, but the one before, our Mars client took a chance on an idea that was breakthrough in every respect. Instead of making a commercial, which costs a couple $1 million to produce, then running it on a Super Bowl, which costs another $5 million to run, stage a Broadway play and ask people to buy tickets to see a Skittles ad, which was a play, an original play. The key song was "Advertising Ruins Everything." It makes you buy shoes you don't need. I mean, so it was a spoof on our whole industry to sell Skittles, and this was an act of bravery on the part of the client to buy an idea like this, which had never been done. It was a great success and won more awards than any DDB had ever won for a single idea. But your point about clients is so important. Bill Bernbach once said, great advertising may be more the result of great clients than of great agencies. And there's a lot of truth in that.
I've always agreed with that. I always find that it's the brave clients who help you. And again, it's not always about winning awards, but it's always, at the end of the day, they have to sell product.
Yeah.
I think it was Ogilvy who said that. It's not creative unless it sells, so we get that.
Yeah.
But the truth is that there is creativity in the sell, and the more creative you are, maybe the more you'll sell, hopefully. But you can also win the awards. And
Absolutely. Creativity is the most powerful force in business, and there are a lot of examples of that. And so when a client understands that, and I think now, and maybe this is a different point, but it used to be that we divided people into left and right brain, and CEOs were always left brain people. Give me facts and Rosser Reeves theory, and people want facts, not stories. And but we knew, and people like Bernbach knew especially, that people make decisions based on their emotions. And but that was fuzzy and soft and squishy to a hard-nosed CEO. Now we have science to prove something like 92% of decisions are made with the heart or emotions.
So let's come back to Jean-Claude. Let's go back to 1984. Jean-Claude not wanting you to be president because you came horrors from the Midwest, and he thought Chicago was the Midwest. But the truth is, you came from Mennonite, Indiana.
Yes, I did, right.
And in a place where there was no TV.
Well, there was no TV. A few people, there was one family who owned a furniture store, and in the back of the store existed a television set. But Mennonites said, no, this is of the devil.
And did you listen to radio?
Yes, but my grandfather had to vet the programs. So I could listen to, after school, Jack Armstrong, the All-American Boy. In the evening, we could listen to Jack Benny and the Great Gildersleeve, and programs like that. But certain, Ellery Queen mysteries were not allowed on the radio.
Not allowed, too much.
But radio was important to me because it was one of my first fascinations with advertising. I mean, the jingles. I thought, that's really cool. Somebody's writing those things. And
Can you remember one from that time that you thought was particularly good?
well, the Wheaties, have you tried Wheaties? The best breakfast food in the land. And then, Jell-O had a jingle, and those jingles were inspiring to me, along with print advertising. We were allowed to read magazines.
Right, and you also got in the store, you received the kinds of what we would call shopper today.
Yeah,
And so you discovered Betty Crocker.
Yeah, exactly. And she was my first pinup girl because we didn't have room in this little grocery store where my mother worked to put up this promotional material. It was a tiny store. So I got to take them home. You know, I would help as a stock boy and, you know, little errands around the store till my mother got off from work. I'd take these things home and study them. Somebody does those pictures and comes up with words like so much milk in a Milky Way, you can almost hear it moo. You know, who does that? Somebody out there does that. And then as a kid in the summer, really young kid, I'd work in the muck fields, pulling weeds out of the onion fields and dill fields. And every Tuesday, a big white truck, an enormous truck, white truck with V8 painted on the side of it. And they would collect the produce and take it off to somewhere. And so when I would hear a V8 ad, I'd say, you know, I know
you made that
I
connection.
made that connection.
Right.
And somebody is taking what I'm doing and turning it into an ad. So yeah, all that stuff was kind of inspiring.
All right, so then you make your way from the real Midwest to sort of the upper Midwest, if you will, and you go to Chicago, and you said you became the oldest beginning copywriter in history.
And
How did you make that?
In that agency's history, yes.
How did you make that transition? Why?
Why
What was the
did-
first thing you worked on? What was rejected? What was the first thing that was rejected? And what was the first thing that you got?
Well, and also,
Published.
why did it take me 10 years out of high school to get my first copywriting job? And that's because I didn't know anything about copywriting. I had no formal education, and I got jobs in commercial art studios, advertising art studios, and I thought I was a commercial artist. And finally, I get an interview one Saturday morning with this big Chicago agency, and I lay out my book, and the guy looks at it and says, well, we don't have an opening for a beginning art director. We have an opening for a beginning copywriter. And I said, I'll take it. And my first job, well, first of all, they didn't even give me a cubicle. It was a workstation next to the soda machines and the coffee machines. And all I did all day was make
Give
change.
change.
Yeah. Hey, kid, you got change for $1. So I couldn't comp. And my first assignment was write a dozen humorous radio commercials for State Farm Insurance. I thought, my God, radio, I'm an art director, you know. And humor, how do you write humor? So I go to my copy chief, he's a doer guy, and I said, Jack, can you give me, or Mr. Trindle, can you give me any tips on writing humor? And he looks over his glasses and he said, you go back to your typewriter and type until you laugh. When you laugh, bring me what made you laugh. If I laugh, it's funny. If I don't laugh, then you go back and type some more. And I couldn't make him laugh. And account guys were getting kind of nervous because we had some deadlines. And so I showed them some of my scripts, and they smiled and even laughed. And they said, well, let's go down to Bloomington, headquarters of State Farm, and show the client. And they laughed. This was when Mr. Trindle was on vacation. Summer vacation. So they gave me, the agency gave me their top broadcast producer, Chris Ford, Harrison Ford's dad.
Wow.
And he takes me to Hollywood, and we get some talent, and we make some funny commercials, and that was sort of an inflection point. But I was 29 years old by that time.
So your first, it's so interesting. So your first real published broadcast work was for State Farm.
Yeah.
But then you created Like a Good Neighbor.
Yeah.
State Farm is there. So
That was
one of
it.
the great lines of all time.
They get a real feeling of security, seeing all those State Farm offices just about anywhere they drive. If they should ever run into trouble, they know a State Farm agent is there to help them get back on the road again.
And like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Can you talk about that, the insight that drove you?
Sure.
And why it became such an enduring idea?
Sure. So, up to that time, State Farm was selling low rates and savings. And we had a jingle. Think of saving $10, $20, $30 or more on car insurance for careful drivers with State Farm Insurance, ba-da-da. And we were sponsoring the Jack Benny program. We were writing live commercials for the Jack Benny cast. And in the 70s then, I can't remember, it was 73 or 74, a planner came to us in the creative department and said, you know, the product that differentiates State Farm from Allstate and all the rest is that agent who's in the neighborhood where the people live. And that's the product. And if we promote the agent, the neighborhood agent, we will separate ourselves from everybody else who's promising savings.
There you go.
So that was the
Insight.
insight. So yeah, so okay, how do we say that? And we end up saying, well, we wrote 3 stanzas to a song. We asked Barry Manilow to write the tune, and he wrote an amazing tune. State Farm never used the tune much except on radio, but we had a verse for auto, for fire, for home. For auto, it was whenever you're driving, wherever you're bound on freeways or byways, the whole country round, you'll feel better knowing, anytime, anywhere, that like a good neighbor,
State Farm is there.
And we got lots of letters from English teachers who said, no, it's as a good neighbor.
So now let's talk about another client, and we're going to talk about a couple of things about this client. Big hamburger seller, biggest, right? And you deserve a break today, which becomes the best jingle of the 20th century.
Yeah.
How'd you get to that? You deserve a break today.
I don't know how much time we have, but it was not exactly, it wasn't quick. First of all, once again, we had great research that showed McDonald's made good food, but as Ray Kroc, the founder, said in his high-pitched voice, Americans can probably make a better hamburger in their backyard, but they can't experience what we can give them. Bringing the family to a clean restaurant, he was obsessed with cleanliness, where they can have foods that they enjoy at a price they can afford, and nobody can match that, and that's what we're selling. So we quickly found and agreed that it was the experience, the McDonald's experience. So how do we describe that? How do we create a campaign that really presents that experience in the most compelling and persuasive way? And we came up with the idea that if you looked at a night shot of a large city, in those days the golden arches were neon lights. There were no indoor seating stores. You know, they were the white and red tile stores. You would see these little islands. And if people want an escape from the routine of meal planning, or if kids want an escape from broccoli and table manners, and if dads want an escape from high prices of eating out, come to the McDonald's Islands. Fantastic. So we're, Fred Turner was CEO by that time of McDonald's. Ray was chairman, whatever. But Fred said, this is fantastic. I'm going to call the Wall Street Journal and tell them to, up my my prediction on our stock, because this is the greatest advertising I've ever seen. We're second day shooting in Hollywood, and we got a call from McDonald's legal department. You can't say, come to the McDonald's Islands. Why not? Well, because there's a chain of root beer stands somewhere in Nebraska or someplace that refers to their outlets as islands of pleasure. And so it's too close. And Fred says, let's buy the goddamn chain. But that was not feasible. So there we are with a day shooting in the can and no campaign and some network deadline looming. So I call 2 music writers in New York, Sid Woloshin and Joe Brooks. Joe had done all the great Pepsi work.
Right, yeah.
And Sid had done something I really thought was great for Pan Am. Pan Am makes the going great with the Letterman, and they levitate into the sky. And so I come to New York and I meet with Joe. And Joe, when he sang, was perfect, but when he talked, he stuttered. And Joe said, well, let me just tell you, if this conversation continues, it's $50,000. So I said, the conversation will not continue. And I went to see Sid, and he said, yeah, we can do this. Do you have a line? I said, well, no. We have sort of get away, like to the McDonald's Islands, And he said, we'll start writing some lyrics and we'll start writing some tunes around that. And so we finally came up with something we could record. And the line was, we're so near yet far away, so get up and get away to McDonald's. And the music was fabulous. We wrote sort of a show tune. And we go to McDonald's and we present that. They said, wow, we love the energy, we love everything. What do they say at the end? Well, they say, we're so near yet far away. Because, you know, and they said, oh, we don't like that. So now we got a sale, but we have 8 notes that need words because they can't be, we're so near yet far away. So we go back into the research, and women who were known as housewives in that day were sometimes using the word break. And that's really the secret, I think, often, is to find what's in the language and present it back to them.
That's great.
And so where does break sit on one of these 8 notes? Which note gets break, and what are the other words that go with it? And through a whole series of trial and error, I remember typing, you deserve a break today. That's it. I called Sid and I said, I think I got it. And he said, well, tell me what it is. And I said, you deserve a break today, so get up and get away. He says, I don't think it's singable. I said, Sid, if you don't sing it, I'll get somebody else to sing it. And he did, and that was it.
You deserve a break today at McDonald's, where your dollar gets a break every day.
Far out.
And we wrote dozens and dozens of lyrics for hundreds of commercials for that campaign.
Now known as the #1 jingle of the 20th century. I just want to stick with McDonald's for 1 minute. Ultimately, you lost the business, but you didn't fire a person. And in the 90-day transition, at the end, you got Anheuser-Busch.
That's
so
true.
I find that to be, in today's world, where if you lose $5 worth of business, we start figuring out how to downsize.
Yeah.
I think this notion of you held on to the people.
Well, David, you probably couldn't do it today. But by that time, I was president of the Chicago agency. And I got the word that we were fired. It was on a Sunday morning. And I was entertaining, my wife and I were entertaining our General Mills client that weekend. And it was also my daughter's first birthday. And we all got home from Sunday morning service at church, about to light the candle on the birthday cake. And I get the phone rings, and I'm told that McDonald's has decided to move their entire account to another agency. So now I got to figure out how to keep entertaining the General Mills client, how to celebrate my daughter's birthday, and what am I going to do tomorrow with all these people at the agency. So I ended up having them crowd into 2 big conference rooms where everybody could hear what I had to say. And I told them the bad news. I said, first of all, every one of you is going to get a fresh $100 bill so you can take your family to dinner tonight. And then
Amazing.
Nobody loses their job. What I want you to do is give McDonald's for the next 90 days the best you can possibly do. Cause them to start having some regrets about the decision they made. And that's how we will respond to this. What I didn't tell them is if we don't replace some revenue in 90 days, then we will have to take some action. But we did, just in the nick of time.
Well, it's why you're called the soft voice visionary. Very clearly, this has to be one of the key proof points. You talked about going to Hollywood with, I had no idea, with Harrison Ford's father, which I love. I'm a big Harrison Ford fan. But you also worked with Sid Caesar, who is, as we know, is one of the great players on Show of Shows, and also Chuck Jones of Looney Tunes.
Well, Chuck Jones was an inspiration to me because when we won the McDonald's business, we inherited Ronald McDonald. And we knew that we could not retire Ronald, even though research told us that kids thought he was a bit of a wuss. But a competing agency, someone you would have remembered, recommended strongly that Ronald be retired. And we knew that the guy who invented Ronald was on the selection team. So that was not an alternative. So I went to, we were not allowed to present creative in the final pitch. But I went to see Chuck Jones in Hollywood and ask him, what would you do with Ronald, you know?
And just an aside, for people, for some of our younger viewers, Chuck Jones was Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny,
Wile E. Coyote.
I mean, some of the most brilliant animation and some of the best voices of all time.
Oh,
so
yeah.
so if they don't know, everybody go back and look, because
Chuck
it's incredible.
Jones, yeah. And so Chuck looks at Ronald, he says, well, one thing, he's too perfect. And people are not interesting if they're perfect. So you got to figure out a way to make him less perfect. And he said, also, he has to have a nemesis. If you want him to be a hero, he has to have a nemesis. And that was the insight that led to the creation of the Hamburglar.
The Hamburglar, of course.
Yeah.
What else? I never knew. I always wondered.
The Hamburglar. The Hamburglar is very clever and very sneaky.
And the Hamburglar was born at 4 a.m.
There you go, the tension.
Yeah.
I love it. Creative tension.
So,
yeah.
you know, as a creative group, we said, okay, you know, what's it going to be? He's going to be a monster, it's going to be a pirate, it's going to be whatever. And this is part of the creative process. You know, it occurs after you try to put ideas together, you struggle, and then you let go of it. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, wait a minute, burglar sounds like burger, Hamburglar. So I wait till 6 o'clock, call my art director partner, Rudy Doctorman, and said, Rudy, I think I got it. Hamburglar, he says, fantastic. And on the train, he sketched the Groucho Marx type character that became the Hamburglar. And then we had the Hamburglar. We said, okay, maybe we need a cop to help Ronald. Big Mac, what's better than an Irish cop named Big Mac? And then now we have a society. We got a mayor who was originally called the Big Cheese, and later Mayor McCheese. And so that's how the whole McDonald land thing became a reality.
Wow,
Toys and clothes and everything
So
else.
let's move forward. So
Okay.
these are all the insight here about how to get to a big idea, I think hasn't changed. But
Has
we've
not.
gone through a period of time when people put down the big idea,
Yeah.
foolishly in my view, and I think we've come back to people understanding that we still need ideas, whether it's the big idea, this makes no difference, we still need ideas.
Yeah.
And in the digital world, you had incredible vision at DDB. You started DDB Tribal. You were very early into that. But you talk about digital distraction.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, if you think of the modern history of advertising, and I'll start with the mid-century, when Bernbach really broke all the rules and decided that as opposed to, you remember the old movie The Huckster?
Yeah.
Sidney Greenstreet, whose brand was Beauty Soap, and he's telling Errol Flynn, I think, was the account guy, I'm not sure, Clark Gable, I think, yeah. And he's sitting there, Greenstreet is saying, I'll tell you how to advertise. We know what we're doing, and that's why we're successful. Here's how you advertise: beauty soap, beauty soap, beauty soap, beauty soap. Beat it into their head till it comes out of their ears. And that was how you made advertising. The high priests of advertising were into repetition, you know, the hammers in the head and all that. And Bill said, no, that's not right. We involve and engage people's intellect, their sense of humor, their intelligence. And that started the creative revolution. And other people followed Bill and his agency. Many we could name them. Then, at the end of the century, came what was called the digital disruption at the end of the 20th century. And the digital messiahs predicted, you know, we were gone. No more need for Madison Avenue. But what I observed was, because you're right, we did say, our holding company said, you guys don't know how to do this, we'll take positions in some of the digital specialty houses. And we said, well, let's try it. And so we said, any DDB agency around the world that wants to try this, go ahead, you have a year to try it. And then after a year, we brought them all into New York and say, okay, Tell us what happened, best practices, successes and failures, and we will form a brand, which was Tribal DDB. But I observed that people were becoming so obsessed with the toys, the new technology, that they were not focusing on the basics. The fact, as you say, one thing that doesn't change is people. And
You're still talking to people.
yeah, people and their obsessive drives to survive, to succeed, to be admired, to be loved, to take
Right.
care of their own, all that stuff doesn't change. And now you're talking about all these shiny new objects. And people started doing things in our industry just because they could. It was possible, not because they should. And that's why I started calling it the digital distraction, because we were just being distracted from the big idea. And I said repeatedly, there is still a big difference between a click and a connection. There's a big difference between an algorithm and a true insight into human nature. There's a big difference between a one-off stunt and an enduring brand story, and a big difference between big data and a big idea. And now I think we're entering, or maybe we have in the past 2 or 3 years, refocusing on some of the basics.
Right, I would agree with that. And I think that's why it's so important to listen to you. So I want to come back to Any Wednesday.
Okay.
And I'm going to use some of your quotes. And I want you to help us and give the audience a succinct point of view that they can take with them and be inspired and motivated and actually use when it comes to their own creativity. So the first is, and I love all the ones that I went through the whole book. These are the ones that I picked out. I think these are amazing.
They could also go on Amazon and buy the book.
Yeah, by the way, everybody buy the book. Please, buy the book. We'll talk about buying books. Simplicity, surprise, and a smile.
Yeah. That came from just observing the ads and commercials that I thought were really successful, to see were there any common characteristics. And, going back to Bill's early work for Volkswagen Beetle, some of the Alka-Seltzer work, and things that I really said, wow, I wish I had done that. And it seemed to me that it was always simple, and surprise is an important element, certainly in humor. It's the maybe most important thing, surprise. And a smile. Now, it could be a smile of humor, a response to humor, or it could be a smile of appreciation. Wow, they really understand me. They really know something about, or it could be a smile of appreciation of craft. So I found that as a pretty good lens throughout my career to say, could this be made more simple?
I love it. All right, so here's one that I know is going to talk to everybody. 4 freedoms that should be present in any creative culture.
Exactly. When we started to get really big, the question of culture became a challenge, because you have 96 countries, and as you know, you can't be there all the time. So how can we have a culture that unites this group as a network? We had Bill Bernbach's insights into the creative product and into humanity to some extent. And we thought that the core values were creativity and humanity. So how do we address network-wide the question of humanity in the workplace? And Phyllis Robinson, who had been Bill's first copy chief, in an interview back in the 50s said, well, the most important thing was we had freedom to do whatever we wanted, sort of, and explore all new areas and new forays into unknown territory. So I came up with the idea of saying, how can we institutionalize freedom for our people? And not that the idea of 4 freedoms was original, but thinking what were the key freedoms necessary for a creative culture? And the first was freedom to fail, If we expect people to take forays into uncharted territory, they will not always succeed. And if we want them to try again, we better grant them the
Freedom to fail.
freedom to fail. And I made a distinction between freedom to fail and freedom to fail and fail and fail and fail. Freedom from fear. There are management philosophies that believe in using fear and intimidation to get stuff done, and some people have succeeded that way. But in a creative,
Sadly.
yeah, sadly. But in
They have.
a creative organization, we said in our organization, management by intimidation has no place. You cannot instruct creative people to be creative. You can inspire them.
Anybody, I mean,
Yeah.
right.
Or you
It's not a
can't
long-term strategy.
You can't command people.
Right.
So intimidation is not here. The freedom from chaos was not about the kind of sort of churn that has to be happening in any creative organization, but the kind of chaos that results from management saying one thing, doing another, closed door meetings, memos that come surprising, but creative people go crazy when that happens, and that's the kind of chaos. But the most important was the freedom to be. That each individual has to be respected, and the dignity of each individual has to be celebrated, and diversity has to be celebrated, so that and people have to be in a culture that allows them to grow and become successful in their own right, and they also have to have a life outside the place. So those four freedoms, and they became sort of...
And they're still true. They're still true, in my view. They're still true. So everybody, I'm sure, is taking notes. So one last one that everybody's going to take notes on, I know.
Okay.
What do you do when a good idea comes under attack?
It's easy to answer the question in theory. And it goes like this: know what the client wants, and that's listening. I get back to listening. Know what the client needs, and you better be really sure that you know what the client needs. And then the hard part: know how to make the client want what the client needs. In the case of, let's take "What's Up" for Anheuser-Busch.
Hold on. Hello?
That
was great.
We felt that was really a good idea. We felt that was what this aging brand, Budweiser, needed. What do you do when nobody at the client agrees with that? Finally, and by the way, trust enters into this discussion, because we, by that time, had been working for Anheuser-Busch for a long time, and so there was some trust. But our argument was, August, there's an ingredient that your brand needs that your finest brewmaster cannot put into that beer. And we can add that ingredient. It's called cool hipness, and we can do that with these guys and their street greeting. And his answer was, I'm still not sure I get it, but if you want to try it, I'll let you try it.
Wow. One more big line.
Viral.
One more big line. Okay. So even somebody like me, who eats kosher, has never eaten a McDonald's burger except in Israel, where there's a kosher McDonald's.
That's right.
And I literally, until the day my first trip to Israel, when they first opened that McDonald's, it's where I wanted to go. Before I went to the holy place, I wanted to go to that McDonald's. I spent my whole life. But even I knew as a kid, 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun.
Yeah, because...
Can you say that?
Yeah, 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions, sesame seed bun. But that's because that's because music is a great mnemonic, and we.
I had a look though. You didn't look.
Yeah, we said, how can we come up with a dumb, tuneless chant that would help people remember this. And that's the way we teach our kids the alphabet, you know, A, B, C, D, with a little tuneless chant. So that's how that got hatched. On the subject of music, we used to write, as you know, we used to write great advertising songs. Not only we, but the industry. You used to have wonderful, remember Kodak using, you know, Paul Anka, Remember Yesterday, and the Kids on the Hilltop and so forth. And now we don't do that much anymore. But that's a different subject.
So Keith, just on behalf of myself and the New York Festival and all the people who can be watching this, all the creatives who are just going to be so inspired by your stories, I want to thank you. Soft-spoken visionary, it's so obvious. Advertising Hall of Fame, top 100 influentials ever in the history of advertising. But I think most importantly, just a generous friend. And I thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Real pleasure to be with you.
It's great to listen to you. Thank you.